Hello, this is Paul Hoyt. Welcome to our webinar today. Our office hours presentation is a relaxed, informal mentoring program that we do almost every Monday at noon Pacific time. All these recordings, slides, and exercises are archived in the members area on my website, and all the recordings are available on my YouTube channel at youtube.com/user/Paul Hoyt. The reason I do these is because I know that being a successful business owner can be a great experience, but I also know that it's tough. You need education, training, tools, and teamwork in order to be successful, and I want you to get to know me. Because when you get to know me, you will realize that first and most importantly, that I really do care about you. I really want you to succeed in every area of your life, whatever that means to you, and I want you to find the greatness, the happiness, and the divinity within yourself, and then remember it, embrace it, and live it every single day as I try to do. My passion is to increase the survival rate, accelerate the growth rate, and reduce the struggle rate of businesses in America, and my vision is to help millions of CEOs and entrepreneurs accelerate their business growth and enjoy greater harmony and balance in their lives. And you can help by passing the word along. So if there's somebody in your network that you think would enjoy a conversation with a business consultant who really cares about them, then please pass along my website and my contact information. I would be most appreciative of that. Our agenda for our office hours program is that we have an in-depth discussion of a business success principle, that I offer some closing remarks, special offers, and invitation for the next office hours session. Then we go into open questions and answers and coaching. So be thinking about the questions that you might have on today's presentation or any other topic that you want to discuss. We usually have some time towards the very end of the presentation to take your questions, whatever they may be. So think about them, write them down so you don't forget them, and ask them at the end of the presentation. I would encourage you to join us on the Brilliant Business groups on both Facebook and LinkedIn. On Facebook, it's facebook.com/groups/Brilliant Business. And on LinkedIn, we have a special link, which is bit.ly/Brilliant Business Group. Join those groups because every day on those groups, I post a business success principle of the day on both Facebook and LinkedIn. And I do an energy of the day posting every day on Facebook. That's part of my habit in the morning. When I wake up in the morning, I post an energy of the day message and try to put out a little motivational or inspirational message every single day. I think we're up to about 478 or 79 days in a row, and my intention is to go for at least another 1,000 days. You can make comments, ask questions, share insights, and let us know what your takeaways are, your action items are within the groups on Facebook or LinkedIn. And if you haven't done so already, I encourage you to like my business page on Facebook. I have a special announcement. We are announcing the introduction to a brand new portfolio of product and service offerings I call the Awakened CEO System. The Awakened CEO System, we're going to talk to you all about that in a webinar that's coming on Wednesday, March the 18th at 6 p.m. Watch your emails for sign-up information or give me a shout-out, an email, or a phone call, and I'll make sure you have an opportunity to join that webinar live or listen to the recording of the webinar. I'm really excited about the Awakened CEO System. My team and I, Stephanie and Marcel, particularly Stephanie, have worked many, many months to create the portfolio of products and services and to get the branding right. So we are launching it this Wednesday, and that's going to really be a momentous day for us as we turn the next chapter in my particular business. Today's topic, however, is on a book called The Goal, Eliminating Your Constraints, based on the book The Goal, A Process of Ongoing Improvement by Elihayu Goldratt, originally published in 1984. Really was and is a fascinating book. I'll talk to you about it a little bit more. But first, we always try to take the subject matter of the day and tag it to one or more of our key performance areas of business. And this book is really focused on both leadership as a leadership mindset and mentality, and focused on operations and administration. It's primarily focused on the operating systems, the back office systems within your company. But it's also a financial system because we talk about the importance of managing the throughput of sales in your company and that definitely has financial implications, especially when it comes to the investment that you have in inventory and work in process and how you create a much more lean operation in your back office. Our agenda today is we're going to talk about the book a little bit. I'll have a couple of words about goals in general. We'll talk about key concepts from the book, the theory of constraint process, and you'll see TOC as an abbreviation for theory of constraints throughout the presentation today. We'll talk about how to apply the theory of constraints at a very small business, one that isn't even a manufacturing business. And then we'll sum it all up with the bottom line. Here's a little bit of an overview on the book itself. First of all, this book is really quite innovative when it came out in 1984 because it's a business novel, and I think it was one of the first, and probably was the first and probably the most celebrated business novel of all time. In fact, they even made it into a movie. I've read the book a couple of times. I haven't watched the movie, but I know that it could make a great movie because it's a story about a gentleman named Alex Rogo, who's a plant manager facing both personal and professional challenges. So in the book, we talk about the professional challenges that he faces as a plant manager at a plant that's really not performing very well at all. And, of course, he's under tremendous pressure by the senior executives at his company to get things in shape. In fact, he's given a 90-day deadline to turn things around or probably seek a position elsewhere. His job is on the line. And at the same time, he's having challenges with his personal life as well, with his relationships with his family in particular. And I don't want to spoil the book for you, but generally it weaves the story back and forth about how Alex goes to work and faces professional challenges, and then he comes home and faces personal challenges, which is, the real world. That's the way that most of us, who are challenged in life experience life. We have challenges and blessings and opportunities, in both our personal life and our professional life. And this book, this business novel, really, it was one of the very first ones to broach that. In his professional world, he is mentored by a former professor named Jonah. We don't know Jonah's last name. All we know him is as Jonah, whom he met at an airport one time when he was on his way to a convention, and they begin this discussion about Alex's challenges, and Jonah, using the Socratic method, continues to ask Alex great questions to allow him to discover for himself what the solution is to his professional problems. And, of course, the solution is all about the theory of constraints. Step by step, Jonah guides Alex to discover those principles of the theory of constraints, and they unfold for the readers of the book at the same time. The book is called The Goal. So one of the first discussions I want to have with you today is, why do we have goals in the first place? Goals direct our decision-making. They allow for the measurement of progress, and when you clearly communicate those goals at your company, they can enable teamwork and collaboration. I think it's really a good idea to take our vision, our long-term plan, and take that down and compress it into a near-term goals so that we can have something that we can focus on and something that our company can focus on. For any of you out there who've worked with me, and I assume that that's a lot of you who either have worked with me or want to work with me, you'll know that I'm a big fan of the 90-day growth plan. And in that 90-day growth plan, we very specifically outline the goals that you have for those 90 days in a way that's smart, that's specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bounded. I know I've done other presentations on goals when it comes to increasing productivity, and if you want to learn more about that, I would encourage you to watch some of the other office hours presentations. Well, one of the questions that Jonah asked Alex was, what are your goals? And Alex came up with some pretty typical goals for a plant manager. First of all, we want to make a product. We want to increase our market share. And the products that we make, we want to make them in a quality manner so that we can reduce rework and returns and all that sort of stuff. And we want to produce efficiently so that we can make more money, and we want to increase stockholder value. He actually had a list that was a little bit longer than these 5, but these 5 are representative of the goals that Alex came up with when Jonah asked him, what are your goals? To make product, make it in a quality way, an efficient way, to increase our market share and increase stakeholder value. And Jonah says, you know, that's not it. You should only have one goal, and that goal is revenue throughput, so that you have the ability to generate cash through your company. Everything that you do should be focused on generating revenue by pushing product through your system and out the other side so it's deliverable to your customers so that they pay you. One quote from the book is, the goal and the only goal that a manufacturing plant has is to reduce their operating expense and reduce inventory while simultaneously increasing throughput. And the most powerful effect that you can have is to increase throughput. Which brings us to some of the key concepts of this book, because he uses the terms inventory and operating expense and throughput in ways that are not normal, which is, by the way, is pretty typical in my industry. There's no god of definitions out there that decrees exactly how we can use terminology. So everybody gets to use terminology in a way that suits them the best, but it's up to us, as responsible professionals to clarify the way that we're using those words so that we can have better communication. So here are some of the key concepts that Jonah used in his definition. First of all, inventory. He says inventory is all the money that the company has invested to produce products, which is all of the assets of the company. So it's just not your raw materials inventory and your sub-assemblies inventory and your finished goods inventory and your work in process inventory, and there's lots of inventory classifications that we can have. But he also considers inventory to be your facilities and the people that you have working for you. It's any asset of the company, of intellectual property, of human capital assets, or furniture and fixtures, or plant and equipment, or buildings and land, or the actual inventory that you receive at your shipping dock or receiving dock and that flows through the system and out the other end. So that's an interesting definition of the term inventory. And of course, his primary goal is to reduce that inventory and increase throughput simultaneously. So that means reducing the facilities that you have, reducing the plant and equipment, reducing the number of people that you have, reducing the cash that you've invested in the system, and of course, reducing the inventory that you actually have on the shelves and in your manufacturing plant on the shop floor. He finds throughput to be the rate at which the system generates money through sales. So that's not the rate of the number of units that goes out the shipping dock. It's not the tonnage that goes out the shipping dock or the number of shipments that you make on a daily basis. It's the way the system generates money through sales. So what that means is if you're generating just a few things that are making you a lot of money, that's a lot better than generating a lot of things that make you a little bit of money. So that's a very important concept for anybody at any size of business to recognize, is if the goal of the business is to generate revenue and to generate cash in the business, you may be better off shipping a few very large things than you are shipping a whole bunch of very small things. From a customer point of view, you may be better off having a few customers at $5,000 a month revenue than having dozens of customers at $100 a month revenue each. So that's an important concept. He defines throughput, which is the goal of the entire company, by the way, to increase throughput, revenue through throughput, and it's the rate at which the system generates money through sales, not generates quantity of product through sales. He considers operational expenses all of the money that's spent to convert inventory to throughput. So all of that inventory that you have, the people that you have, the plant and equipment that you have, the facilities that you have, and of course the inventory that you have on your shop floor, anything that you spend to push that material through the system is an operational expense. That operational expense would be the money that you spend on utilities, the money that you spend on supplies, the money that you spend on your staff is considered to be an operational expense. So we want to reduce our operational expense and reduce our inventory while we are increasing the throughput through our plant. And anything that gets in our way, anything that impedes the progress, that slows us down in any way, is a bottleneck. A bottleneck is any resource whose capacity or performance, I would say, is less than its demand. And so as we increase the throughput of the system, then we necessarily increase the capacity requirements of almost every resource within the system, every work center within the system, and sooner or later one of those is going to be a constraint to our growth. Which brings us to the theory of constraints. The theory of constraints says that an individual work center or department productivity doesn't matter nearly as much as the productivity of the entire system. We're looking at system throughput here, and even though a system almost by definition has multiple departments or functions within it, and certainly any large company at all has the way that you hand off material and information from one work center to the next, from one department to the next. When you focus on the individual work centers and the efficiency of individual work centers, the theory of constraint says don't forget to think about and focus all of your time and attention on the throughput of the entire system. That individual work center department productivity and efficiency doesn't really matter. It is the system throughput and the system productivity and the system efficiency that really matters. You have to balance the flow through the system with the demand of the system, and to increase the throughput of your system, to focus on the bottlenecks, because an hour lost at a bottleneck is an hour lost by the entire system. I don't know if any of you are project managers out there, but one of the key concepts in project management is the concept of a critical path. And we oftentimes say that an hour lost on any function, any task that's on the critical path of a project plan is an hour lost to the entire project plan itself. And this is exactly the same concept, except we're taking it in the context of a manufacturing plant, whether it be a discrete manufacturing plant or a process manufacturing or repetitive manufacturing. You know, an hour lost at a bottleneck is an hour lost by the entire system. And it could be that an hour lost at a bottleneck is costing you hundreds of thousands of dollars. If your system, for example, is at a $300 million company that's generating $1 million worth of productivity every single day, and you have one key bottleneck that's running 3 shifts, and that bottleneck is down for a shift, you could cost the company $400,000 or $500,000 just by having that bottleneck down for a shift. And it could be costing the company $50,000 an hour to have that bottleneck be constrained. So it can be a very, very expensive proposition for you to lose an hour's worth of productivity at a bottleneck resource. The theory of constraints process is very simple. It's, first of all, we identify the constraint. We understand what our limits of capacity are and what individual work center is in fact the constraining work center. And we make everything else subordinate to that work center, which means all of the people, all of the other work centers, all of our focus and attention is on that constraining work center, and we focus on increasing the performance of that constraint. And if it still ends up being the constraint, then we increase the capacity of that constraint, which by definition will increase the capacity of the entire system, and then we do it all again. Once we have increased the capacity of the system, then we go back in and identify the next constraint or the next bottleneck, which is one of the key concepts, which I don't think is ever directly stated in the book, but bottlenecks move. If you have a system with 4 or 5 different work centers in it, and you increase the capacity of one of the work centers so that it's no longer the constraint, typically one of the other work centers becomes the constraining resource, becomes the constraining process. So you use this theory of constraints process over and over and over again as you scale up the productivity and scale up the throughput of the entire system. We're going to show you a little example coming up next that is actually in the book that I dearly love, called the Boy Scout hike. So I want you to imagine, if you will, that you're on a hike with a Boy Scout troop. And in this Boy Scout troop, you've got a leader, you've got several big guys, and you got one little guy in the middle. This little guy here in the middle, his name is Herbie. I want you to take a look at Herbie for a second, because he's smaller than the rest of the people on the hike, and he's got a pretty big backpack. In fact, his backpack is as big or bigger than the rest of the people on the hike. It looks like the hike leader, the Boy Scout leader there, isn't wearing a backpack at all, but I'm sure that's just the diagram that we have. So as they go on this hike, something interesting happens, and that is that the people following Herbie and Herbie himself, because he's a smaller guy with a big backpack, he can't walk as fast as the leader and as all of the other people who are on the hike in front of him. And so a gap begins to emerge. The people in the front have to slow down and wait for Herbie. The people behind Herbie are already slowing down to wait for Herbie. So Herbie becomes the constraint. This particular troop of Boy Scouts cannot move at 4 miles an hour because Herbie can only move at 3 miles an hour. And so they are not only constrained, but the system itself is at risk of breaking because of the gaps that are going to form in front of Herbie and behind the leaders of the team. So the number one solution that's offered by the theory of constraints is that you make everything else subordinate to Herbie, that you move Herbie to the front of the line so that the constraint is at the front of the line and you no longer are at risk of having significant gaps in between the people who are on the hike. And I don't know if any of you who've been on a Boy Scout hike before. It was my privilege to go on a few of these hikes when my sons were younger, and we went on Boy Scout hikes. And that's one of the things you absolutely don't want to have, is that you don't want to have large gaps in between the hike because you don't want to lose touch. Because if you lose touch between the leaders at the front of the hike and the leaders at the back of the hike, you have an opportunity for people taking the wrong trail. And if you take the wrong trail and you don't notice it for a while because somebody was 10 minutes ahead and out of the sight of somebody else, it can be a life-threatening problem. So you absolutely don't want to lose touch on a Boy Scout hike, and keeping in touch with everybody is far more important than even making the maximum amount of distance in a particular hour. So on the Boy Scout hike, what they did was move Herbie to the front. Herbie becomes the constraint, and everything else is subordinate to that constraint. Everything is focused on supporting this constraint to let the constraint go as fast as it can. And one of the things that they do because of that is they lessen the load on Herbie's backpack. So you'll notice here in this diagram that now Herbie has a small backpack, and we've taken the load out of that pack and distributed it amongst the other members of the hike so that Herbie can walk faster. Now that Herbie can walk faster, the entire troop can go faster. They can reach their campsite earlier and perhaps pitch their tent in the daylight instead of pitching a tent in the dark, in the rain, which is no fun at all. I've had an opportunity to do that too. So that's a pretty interesting example. We identified the constraint, we made everything else subordinate to the constraint, and then we increased the throughput of the constraint or the performance of the constraint, and you can do that in your small business as well. So let's take all this theory of constraint conversation, which is usually had in the context of a large manufacturing company, and apply that to small businesses. Apply this to the millions of small businesses out there who are not manufacturing a product and who typically will have 5 or fewer employees. So let's talk about this in terms of a very simple system where step 1 in the system is for you to generate leads. The step 2 in the system is for you to take the leads that were generated in step 1 and convert those into sales. In step 3 of the system, we take those agreements and those contracts for products or services and we prepare them for delivery in step 4. So that's a real simple 4-step flow through a system in a small business, whether you have a product or a service. If you have a product, then in preparation you may have some assembly or kitting or packaging that needs to go on, and you may have a fulfillment opportunity. If it's a service industry, then preparing for growth may be applying, using, or maybe preparing to assign that service obligation to one of your resources, etc. So how does this apply to you? If you have a small business then the number of leads that you have in step number 1 doesn't matter if those leads just fall on the floor. So, for example, if you are constrained in sales, preparation, or delivery, dramatically increasing the number of leads that you have will not increase the throughput of the system at all. It will only increase the throughput of the system if lead generation is the constraining bottleneck, if that's the resource that's limiting you. And in fact, with most companies, what we find is a whole bunch of their leads fall on the floor. I worked with a company a number of years ago, like in 2002, 2003, that had a system for helping you manage the leads that you got at a trade show or a conference, because their observation and surveys showed that as many as 80 to 90% of all of those business cards and leads potentials that were captured at trade shows and conferences essentially fell on the floor, that they were never handed off to a salesperson, or they were handed off and the salesperson never took activity. So the big question is, why are you going to trade shows and conferences in the first darn place to generate all of these leads if those leads are just falling on the floor and nobody's doing anything with them? In today's world, however, in the world of information marketing, in the day of databases and list marketing, we don't let those leads fall on the floor, right? Whenever you get a contact, you add it to your database. That's certainly my practice, and I think the practice of most competent professionals today who have a nurture marketing or a drip marketing program like this office hours presentation that you're listening to right now. We take those leads and we make sure they don't fall onto the floor. And while they may not immediately go into sales opportunities, we at least didn't let them fall onto the floor. Then, once you have the lead, you have to sell or you break the chain. If sales is your constraint, sales capacity, sales expertise, if you're not taking those leads and converting them into closed deals in a timely and efficient manner, then they're really not making any difference. The leads don't make any difference, and you certainly don't have the constraints or increasing your capacity to prepare and deliver products doesn't make any difference if sales is the bottleneck. And once you sell, of course, then you have to prepare and deliver. So I believe that every small business out there has constraints anytime that they have a flow-through process. And this is a simple example of a flow-through process. We take leads, we convert them into deals, we do something to deliver and prepare to deliver, rather, our product or service, and we deliver our product or service. That is a system which can be benefited by a conversation about the theory of constraints. So, as I've said several times, increasing the effectiveness of a single work center doesn't matter unless it's the constraint. And you have to do whatever is necessary to increase the throughput. That last comment is particularly important to small business owners, because most small business owners, and I put myself squarely in this school of thought, there are things that we love to do and things that we don't love to do so much, or things that are a little bit of a chore for us. For some of you, you may love to actually deliver and do your stuff. You may love to do spreadsheets and business plans like I love to do. You may love to do office hours presentations like I love to do. Some of you may love to do sales. And it's that other stuff, that stuff that we don't love to do, that typically becomes the constraining resource. And the reason we're constrained in that resource is because we're not focusing enough time and attention on that resource. We're not allowing ourselves to sell at our capacity, to generate leads at our capacity. Or in some cases, if you're a person who just loves to sell, you may not allow yourself focus enough time and attention on preparing to deliver and then actually delivering the goods that people are ordering from you. So whether you're a very large manufacturing company or whether you're a very small company, every company has a flow-through of opportunities from lead generation to the time that you're actually delivering the good. And every company has a constraining resource, whether that constraining resource is one out of design because you only have a few people assigned to it, or you only have one machine in the back of the plant that can make those particular things, or whether it's a matter of conscious or subconscious choice because you're just not focusing enough time and attention on that constraining resource or work center. So here's the bottom line. Every system has constraints. Your business has constraints. My business has constraints. Every system has constraints. Most systems are unbalanced in the capacity of individual work centers. Most systems will have a bottleneck work center. Again, whether it's because it's part of their plant and the equipment, and that's just the way the plant has been designed, or whether it's a matter of choice, and it's the way your mind has been designed over time, and the way that you don't feel comfortable about putting in the time and effort where you really need to be putting in the time and effort. And you can improve the performance of your business, of your company, by focusing on managing the constraints to increase the throughput of your system. That's been our presentation for today. We talked about an overview of this fantastic business novel, did a little bit of word about goals. We talked about key concepts, the theory of constraints process, about identifying the constraint, improving the capacity and performance of that constraint, etc. We talked about how this applies to my business and your business and other small businesses out there, even if you're not manufacturing a product, and we summed it all up with the bottom line. So here's your homework. If you enjoyed this conversation, then I encourage you to go get the goal and read it. You can get I don't even know if it's available on a Kindle version or not, but it is worth it. And besides that, it's fun to read because it really is a novel. And you get to know the story of Alex Rogo and his personal and professional challenges. And I remember how fascinating it was when I first read this book, 30 years ago when I read the book. Identify your constraints at your business. Use the theory of constraints process to increase your capacity by managing your constraints. And as always, get coaching and support to manage the process when you need it. Speaking of coaching, we're going to go into questions and answers and open coaching in just a minute. First, comments and questions on the subject of the day, and then any other issues that you have. Go into the Facebook group or the LinkedIn group and tell me what your biggest takeaways are and what insights that you gained from this presentation, and let me know what you're going to focus on. I really enjoy it when somebody says, I'm going to take what I learned today on this call and I'm going to go do something with it in my business right away to accelerate my growth, to improve my productivity or my efficiency. Here at our Hoyt Management Group, our support services include education, training, consulting, and coaching services, and growth management services, which is a do-it-with-you service. So our portfolio of products and services not only teach you how to do things for yourself, we'll also do it with you, and in some cases we'll actually do it for you. You can hand a task off to us, and we'll put our fingers on the keyboards, and we'll make the phone calls, and we'll have deliverables associated with our consulting engagements. And as a reminder, I am most excited about the call this Wednesday where we're going to introduce you to the Awakened CEO system. That's this Wednesday, March the 18th, for those of you that are here live or listening to the phone call. Watch your emails, social media, your Brilliant Business Group on Facebook or LinkedIn, or call me for more information because we're very, very excited about the Awakened CEO system and the difference that that can make in your life and in your business performance. Our next office hours presentation will be on March the 30th. That's 2 weeks. I'm skipping a week because next week I'll be going to the CEO Space Business Growth Conference in Las Vegas, where I have the opportunity to teach classes on business plans, have meal tables with the faculty, and generally hobnob with members of my extended family. That will be my 53rd CEO Space Business Growth Conference, so I'm excited about that. As a consequence, our next session will be on March the 30th. I'll still be in Las Vegas, but we'll do the conversation from my hotel room, and we'll do live group coaching because I won't have the time during the week to prepare for a presentation. If there are particular topics you want me to address, this is office hours number 70, so I've addressed a lot of topics, but you know what? There's a lot more to go to. So if you have a topic that you want me to address or address again, please go to paulsurvey.com and let me know what that is. And in between now and the time that we meet the next time, be sure you do your homework. We're going to go into open questions, answers, and coaching right now. Again, first, comments and questions on the topic of the day, then anything that you want to talk about. And there's my contact information. If you want to get a hold of me in any way, I'm always eager to talk to CEOs and entrepreneurs about how I can help them increase the performance of their business and increase their enjoyment of life as well. And with that, we're going to open it up for questions and discussion topics. And let's see who we have on the call. And Stephanie, do we have any questions that came through, or discussion topics on the call today?
Yes. Question number 1. Is it possible to have multiple constraints? And what do I do if I do have multiple constraints?
You know, it's very possible to have multiple constraints. In fact, oftentimes we create our systems so that we have a balanced flow through the system so that you don't have one work center or one person who's more capable than other persons. So in fact, we want to design our systems so that there's equal capacity at every work center within the system. And almost by definition then, if you have equal capacity and equal performance at each one of the work centers, then all of the work centers in your system are constraining work centers, and increasing the capacity of any one of them will not increase the overall throughput of your system. That's pretty rare, however. Usually there is 2 or 3 or 4, let's say we have 5 work centers. 3 of them are balanced at one level of capacity, another one might be a slightly higher capacity, and maybe one of them is very low capacity. So it's easy for us to identify the constraining resource. But for most people, we want to think about actually increasing the performance and increasing the capacity of multiple work centers at the same time. So we recognize that if we increase our capacity to sell, we also have to increase our capacity to deliver. And likewise, if I have a consulting business, adding another consultant to my team isn't going to increase the throughput of my system at all. In fact, it's going to take away from the profitability of the system unless I also increase my capacity to sell. So thinking about increasing the capacity at multiple work centers at the same time is in fact what really happens in the real world. So in the real world, it is rare for you just to have a single resource that is the constraining resource, and when you pick up the capacity of that resource so that it balances out the flow again, that it no longer is a constraint, or every work center within the plant is a constraining resource. I hope that that was helpful, but the bottom line is that it's very possible and probably quite probable that you would have multiple constraining resources at the same time. Next question, Stephanie.
Okay. How much can you increase the capacity of a work center before you have to replace it or add to it in some way?
Yeah, that's a good question, and of course it depends on the work center itself. But let me give you some examples for that. So, for example, if you've got a lot of product that's going out the door, but your shipping department is the constraining resource, you just can't move stuff off the dock fast enough. What you can do is temporarily increase the capacity of that resource by asking people or demanding that people work overtime. So generally speaking, you can impose a mandatory overtime on your system for a while before it breaks and really becomes detrimental to the system. My general rule of thumb is that if you have a system that's performing very well, that you can scale the performance typically of any one work center or resource within the system by about 25% for a fairly long period of time before the system breaks. And that means you just can't double the capacity of a system overnight, and you can't generally maintain the 25% increase in throughput over a long period of time without causing an additional constraint, without breaking the resource. To give you an example of that, again, if your shipping dock is, I'm going to increase the capacity of my shipping dock from 40 hours a week to 50 hours a week by requiring that the one guy who's at my shipping dock or the team of people who are on my shipping dock work 50 hours a week every single week for a long, long time until this demand is satisfied. You can do that for some number of weeks. But if you start doing it for months, then you start getting, some other laws start to come into effect. And what you find is that the shipping department people generally will decrease their productivity so that you'll get as much out of them in 50 hours a week as you used to get out of them in 40 hours a week. The better solution to that, by the way, is probably to hire another person or to somehow balance out the workload in a different way. I used to work a lot with computer systems, and with computer systems, we were all about finding the bottleneck to the system. Sometimes it was disk throughput speed. Sometimes it was bus bandwidth speed. Sometimes it was, the speed of the memory or the CPU. And we had a general rule of thumb in that you could increase the capacity of a system or increase the performance of a system about 25% before one or more of those bottlenecks really began to emerge or began to break the system. So if I was processing 1,000 transactions an hour and everything was running smoothly, the likelihood would be that I could process 1,250 transactions an hour without the system breaking. But if I went much longer than that, we'd soon find that disk capacity, CPU capacity, memory capacity, bus bandwidth capacity, some other aspect of the capacity of that system was going to break and become a constraining bottleneck. So from that experience in working with computing systems, as an architect and as an operations manager for a long time, I came up with that kind of rule of 25% on my own, that you can temporarily increase the throughput of the system 25%, and it, generally speaking, won't break on you if you're running in a smooth manner. If your system is already strained, if your system is already running at capacity or beyond, kind of scheduled capacity, then increasing it 25% may not be practical. But most of the time, that's a practical guideline. Hopefully that was helpful. Stephanie, do you have another question for me?
Okay. I'm a coach. Can you tell me what my constraints would be?
Yeah, I probably can, because most coaching systems are constrained by sales. Most coaches are good coaches. They have the ability to deliver, and they're happy to work 20, 30, 40 hours a week, in coaching conversations and in coaching sessions with their clients. 40 hours a week, by the way, might be a bit of a stretch, because most of the coaches that I know, coaching is an energy-consuming activity. Some of them say, by the way, exactly the opposite, that they are empowered and invigorated by their coaching sessions, and it's just give me more, give me more, give me more. I'd be happy to have 30, 40, 50 sessions a week with my clients. And so usually it's not delivery that's the constraint. Usually it's sales that's the constraint. And usually it's the constraint because they've fallen into that, what Michael Gerber calls in the E-Myth, that fatal assumption, is that they thought that the coaching business was all about being a coach, when that's only half of what a coaching business is. I think it's only 30 or 40% of what a coaching business is. That a coaching business is really about marketing, product development, and sales, even more so than it is about being a coach. So if you're a coach and you're finding yourself constrained in some way, in other words, your throughput of your system, your ability to generate revenue is constrained and not where you want it to be, my encouragement is to look towards sales. And because it's usually sales, your ability to generate quality leads, and most importantly, your ability to take those leads and convert them into clients, that's probably your constraint to growth. Next question, Stephanie.
What about the other key performance areas? Can marketing or product development be a constraint?
Yes, they can, but only in the sense that marketing is about many things. It's about branding and positioning. It's about great alliances. It's about packaging and pricing your products and services. And marketing is also about generating leads. So in the sense that marketing one of the activities of marketing is a lead generation activity, then it can easily become a constraint of your system. Product development, not so much, unless you find yourself unable to perform effectively in lead generation resource and in sales resource and even in your delivery resources because the quality of your products and services are not what they need to be, or the freshness of your products and services are not what they need to be, that you're not differentiating yourself in the marketplace, that you're not able to describe the value of your products and services in a way that causes people, it allows you to be efficient in your lead and sales generation processes. So in those cases, product development or investing time and energy in product development can really increase the effectiveness of the lead generating resources, increase the effectiveness of the sales generating resources, and in some ways increase the effectiveness and the performance of your preparation and your delivery resources as well. So I think the better answer is that marketing is generally an indirect constraint, that product development is an indirect constraint, and that financial management, operations, other aspects of operations and administration can be indirect constraints in that they take time and attention away from the overall system, but they're not direct constraints as in the ones that we mentioned earlier today. Lead generation, sales, preparing to deliver a product, and actually delivering a product are when I think about a manufacturing process, that's the way that material or customers flow through your system. And the other aspects, the other key performance areas of business, leadership, marketing, product development, customer service, are indirect constraints as opposed to being direct constraints to your system. Any other questions that you see, Stephanie? I see one or two questions here in the questions box itself that we might want to address. Pick a question for me if you would, Stephanie.
Yeah, there's a comment here. One issue to not overlook when adopting a shrinkage of inventory approach is to sacrifice resiliency. Businesses can be knocked to the canvas if an adverse client event occurs and there's no cushion for quality support to preserve a key relationship. Pinching pennies can cost many dollars in disappointed clients who will go somewhere else for their future needs.
That's extremely well said. So, and by the way, pinching pennies on inventory can be a classic example of optimizing the efficiency or the apparent productivity of one work center and sacrificing the throughput or the effectiveness of the entire system. So, and by the way, I don't know how many of you out there have worked in large companies, especially manufacturing companies, but it's very common for the receiving dock to have their own performance goals and the shipping dock to have their performance goals, and every single work center within the system to have their performance goals, including, as this comment suggested, the inventory managers to have their performance goals. So their performance goals is throughput by inventory levels, to reduce their inventory to the point that the investment in inventory has a more favorable ratio to throughput than it does otherwise. But almost by definition, the more inventory that you have, the better your customer service is, the less stock outages that you will have, and the less back order positions that you will have, and the greater the customer service that you will have, because you have greater satisfaction because they won't have gone into a back order or stock out condition. That's a huge challenge with most companies who have a lot of inventory, is how do you balance inventory levels with the goals that you also have to minimize the number of back orders and stock out positions that you've got. So you're absolutely right. That's a classic example of how optimizing the inventory department might actually fail the entire system by decreasing customer service and decreasing the actual number of orders that come through the system, because people can't buy if you don't have the material, and they won't buy. They'll go to your competition if they get you in the stock out position or a back order position more than just a couple of times. That's an excellent comment. That came from one of my compatriots that we used to work together in manufacturing enterprises a long, long, long time ago. So thank you very much for that comment, Richard. Next comment, please, or question. Anything else, Stephanie?
Yes. On the comment about the temporary 25% increase, would you agree that this is particularly applicable to billable professional services or services businesses where this translates into overtime?
Yeah, I would. Anytime it translates into overtime, because my experience in overtime, and I've worked at plants before, as a project manager on large software development projects, where I was measuring on a very detailed basis the productivity of the people that I had working for me. I had 5 or 6 programmers. I knew exactly what their capabilities were when I handed them a report to program. I knew how long it was going to take, and we got to be very accurate at measuring the throughput and the performance of the folks. Well, when we ran into some performance deadlines, and I could tell that given the backlog that we had, the job that lays in front of us and the time that we had, that we weren't going to make the deadline unless we brought people in to work on weekends. So we had the interesting experience of announcing to people that, guess what, we're working Saturdays for the next 4 weeks. And what we noticed on about the 3rd weekend and the 4th weekend was that their productivity dropped enormously. That by the end of the 4th weekend, that they were getting as much done in 50 hours of work as they had previously gotten done in 40 hours of work. And the system just did not support that increase in hours the way that we had hoped that it would. Now, if your service people are running on an assembly line basis, where there's something else that dictates the performance and the capacity of the system, then I think overtime can really work. And for some limited environments for a limited period of time, that sort of overtime effort can be very effective too. Right now we're in the middle of tax season, so most CPAs and accounting and bookkeeping professionals are working their fanny off, 100 or 110 hours a week, and they will do that for 5 or 6 weeks to push through all of the tax returns because this is the time of year that they make their money. In that case, the entire system is organized, their businesses are organized, in fact our society is organized so that they work an enormous amount of hours for some limited period of time, for 2 months generally, maybe 3 months, for February, March, and half of April. They work an enormous number of hours in order to push through all the tax returns. But they could not sustain that. You just can't sustain 110 hours a week for 50 weeks. You get very much out of balance if that's the situation for you. And speaking out of balance, I want to conclude here, if I can, with going back and focusing on the announcement of the Awakened CEO system. I want you to remember that, because one of the things that we talk about with the Awakened CEO system is a strong, strong encouragement to focus on the 3 Bs, on your business, on your balance, and on your beingness. So balance is really, really important, that the business that you operate as a CEO or an entrepreneur should be a part of your life, not everything that's in your life. I really encourage people to maintain a balance in between their physical health, in their emotional health, their mental health, the health of all of their relationships, etc., while you are addressing the challenges of being an entrepreneur. So with that comment on balance, I think that it's really important for you to maintain a balance. And if you want to learn more about how the Awakened CEO system can support your business growth, your professional growth, and your personal growth so that you can maintain your balance and experience more financial health and peace of mind and wisdom and enjoyment of your life, please join me for the Awakened CEO System introductory webinar. Watch your emails. Go to the social media and find out how you can participate in that webinar. I'm very, very excited about that, and I'm very appreciative of the effort that's gone in from my entire team in making the Awakened CEO system a reality. And so with that final note, until we meet again, either on the next office hours presentation in a couple of weeks or on the Awakened CEO launch webinar coming out in a couple of days. This is Paul Hoyt wishing you a most marvelous and prosperous day. Bye-bye.